Welcome back to Studio Wesley Annex, the audiovisual podcast where we break down the lectionary text of the week. I'm your host, Sam Stiles-Williams, and I'm joined by two lovely people here today. I'm going to start with Josh, because Josh, you just made a face for a second like you weren't paying attention, so I decided to throw it to you. How are you doing?
I'm paying attention, Sam. How dare you? What an accusation.
You're locked
what a
in.
crazy accusation.
I'm so sorry. I should.
Sorry, no, I got two monitors, so I had to make sure I had my New Testament text pulled up. It blacked out for a second. But yeah, sure. I'm doing great. That's what happened. I don't know what you want me to say.
Starting with a crazy energy today, and I feel like that's my fault. So Josh, how are you really? How is your soul today?
I'm good. It's November 1st, had a good Halloween. Pretty tired. My soul is great. Usually Derek's the one to ask that question, so it's a little weird with you asking that. But yeah, my soul's good. Classes are doing good. They were doing okay, but now they're doing pretty good. So we're happy about that.
Grace, we're going to throw over to you. How are you today?
So I was texting a friend because some of the folks up here have like a Halloween party every year. Like one of the housing communities just always does a Halloween party. And so I didn't know what I was going to dress up as. And I was texting one of my friends to like figure it out. And I said, well, I could dress up in this thing, but I don't know if it fits me anymore. And then I said, I'm just also trying to finish my homework, like I'd like to dress up as a seminarian who feels confident that they'll pass this semester. So that's where I'm at. But I am very happy to be here with you guys today. How is it with your soul, Sam Stiles-Williams?
My soul is here. I gotta be honest. I'm also tired like Josh. So I started the intro purely on muscle memory, and now I'm here and I'm like becoming awake again. So this is gonna be such an interesting episode. If for those of you who are listening, you won't know this, but the episode from last week was recorded right before this. So I'm on I'm just in the Bible today, guys. So we're gonna keep going deeper into the Bible. Grace, please open us up in prayer.
It makes me think about the Stephen Curtis Chapman song, like I'm diving in, I'm going deep, head I wanna be, which is great, and they're excellent children's dance moves to go with it, which we all love. On that note, let's pray. Hi, God. I am so thankful to be here today with these lovely people. I'm really glad that we can still have moments like this in the middle of good or great or chaos or repetition or whatever is going on. I'm just glad to have community. And I ask that whatever happens in today's episode, that something good can come out of it and that we can enjoy, one, talking to each other, diving into your word, and going deep, God. And I just thank you for whatever comes to light and whatever we can take from it. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
We are only 5 minutes in and we already have had singing. So I hope that this is the vibe of today's episode. And we're going to keep going. Josh, are you ready to sing us through your New Testament text? At some point you have to sing.
I don't know. You're putting me on the spot here, Sam. I don't like that. I'm really excited to get into this text though. It's Hebrews 10, pretty much the whole chapter. And I'm excited to get this text because this text reminds me a lot of the collects that we read in the gathering in community groups, in our intern meetings, because there's just certain words. I don't know if it's translation that I'm reading. I'm reading the Common English Bible, but there's a very definitive tone to this chapter in the Bible, and it's very black and white. It's very easy to read, but certain words and certain connotations within this text really stick out to me. The first thing that really sticks out is when it refers to Jesus as a priest. That's something that I haven't always heard Jesus described as. I've always, the pastor, the teacher, but there's a certain word of priest that kind of, necessarily makes me uncomfortable, but it makes me kind of reevaluate my relationship with Jesus, because there's a certain hierarchy, I guess, in society to the word priest compared to pastor. Grace is not your head, so we're going to go with that. Glad that someone else agrees with me. There's makes it reevaluate where you are in relationship to that person. So anytime that I get to kind of, I'm gonna say like rethink my relationship with Jesus, but like go into it deeper and look at it with a different lens or perspective is always something I like to do. And then it talks, this chapter is mostly about the sacrifice of Jesus and how meaningful it was. And I like it because it uses words like once and for all, uses things like it was just one single time. And it just made me kind of realize how the act of Jesus giving his life up for us and payment for our sins, how there is no more continual, I mean, there is some continual sacrifice, but like people used to slaughter, I think we talked about this last Annex episode I was on. There used to be a continual slaughter of animals and things you'd continually have to give up. And you can still kind of do those things, but you don't really have to do them anymore because Jesus was like, it was kind of a one and done. There is no if and ors or buts about it. Like, I just think I've never really thought about it, but and reading some of the commentary for this chapter, it talked about how weird it would be like if there was more than one thing, and just like that's kind of hard for our brains to wrap around. It's like there's this huge problem with sin with everyone, and just like the whole human race and humanity in general, and for it all just to be solved in one instant, in one like snap of the finger of Jesus dying. And I think that's, I don't sometimes feel like we don't spend enough time on that, or we don't, it's just very hard to conceptualize that this one thing, that it wasn't necessarily a process. I mean, Jesus' life was a process of ministry, but it all just kind of got solved in somewhat in an instant. This passage talks about that and how special it was. So yeah, that's something that really just stuck out to me. There's a certain definitive tone of how the sacrifice of Jesus, how special it was. So I like that about this passage.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think like what you pinpointed specifically about like the confidence of how special it is too, like it's kind of interesting to me that you like compared it to a collect, because like having that in comparison, like if you have like a prayer that you are like repeating to yourself and that you have like structured in such a way, and when you like implement that with this like confidence of Jesus' sacrifice, of like the way that things can be and will be and are, like having those go together, I think is really cool. I just really appreciate that, how you like, and I don't know if like you intended to like bring those together like that, and like having this like repetitive like prayer and like structured collect in comparison with like this confidence of Jesus' sacrifice. But it's just really cool. And having that like change in like common structure, you know, like we're so used to the like animal sacrifice, or like sacrificing like the foods that you had, or like just all sorts of stuff. And so having this like different thing now, yeah, it's just very cool. I'm glad you pinpointed that.
In my response to this text, I'm actually more gonna like respond to you, Josh, because like one thing, we've known each other now for like a year through this program, and one thing that I really appreciate of how you are in your faith is this kind of like definitive, confident, declarative statement, because that's something I really struggle with. Like texts like these where it's just like simple and straightforward, and I'm like, there's no question. I'm not allowed to sit here and like philosophize about this for like 20 years and like struggle with what this means. And I think that's something like this text is showing, and like you said about how human brains aren't necessarily always wired for that, like that is the challenge of having faith, is just letting that be, and letting it be definitive and confident and standing with it. And it's something that like, so I will speak, I don't know how different audience members feel about this, but like that's one of the things that I struggle with in my faith, is that like reassured confidence in it. I like the questioning, I like the ambiguity, and so that definitive confidence in it is like a gift and a trait that should be cherished as part of being a disciple. So I just wanted to like comment on that in this text, but also comment on that in like knowing you as a person. That's a really like strong discipleship trait that I feel like I personally struggle with. So it's interesting to see it in this text.
Yeah, I like how you guys. Thank you, Sam. That means a lot. I like how you said the word confidence. And one thing that kind of stuck out to me is like the focus that's in this chapter is crazy to me because it just talks about pretty much one thing for really just one thing of Jesus' sacrifice for about 20, 30 verses. So yeah, that's something like it's something that sticks out to me. I like that perspective. I've never thought about my faith as like that definitive. So thank you, Sam.
And like it kind of going off of that, it's like Christ, this almost Hebrews in itself, like the chapters we're looking at almost feel like one full speech of like going from topic to topic to topic, like building on itself. Because again, like just having come from, we did 23 through 28, which is all about what Christ's sacrifice means for the church. And this is a continuation of that thought. And that's something really important when you're looking at the lifespan of the Bible. So we're going to keep going. Grace, you get a psalm today. I know you're so excited to give us a psalm.
I am. The psalms are so fun, you guys. And like, it's also funny to me whenever like I get a psalm and I'm like, yeah, I mean, this is just like a pretty like simple, like run of the mill, straightforward psalm. And then other people don't like it. And I'm like, y'all, this is classic. This is classic. Okay, so yeah, today we're looking at Psalm 16, which I do think is pretty classic. It's one that it's like, it feels like you've heard it before, even if you haven't, or maybe you have, you don't know. But they sound like really similar, or it sounds really similar to like a different one, you know? But, so this one, it's called Song of Trust and Security in God is like the start of it, looking at the NRSV. It's just really beautiful. And like talking about, again, like asking God to protect. David is asking, or it's like, it's of David. Did David write it? Arguable. That's a whole different conversation. But like, it's just really nice because it's like asking for God to, it's like, God, like, I trust you. I trust you. But if you could protect me, that would be wonderful. Thank you. The part that I really, really connected with was verse 5. And in the NRSV, it says, "The Lord is my chosen portion and my cup. You hold my lot." And for me, the part that like really got me was like thinking about God like holding my lot. And the way that I interpreted that, which could be not how other people interpret it, which is totally fine. But the way that I saw it in my head, like the imagery that it brought out was like when people would cast lots. I'm glad I have chopsticks with me right now because it actually like really helps. But like pretend there's like a bunch of them. And if people are like casting lots, like I would like even them all out. And so they would all be like the same height. And then each of y'all would like pick one. And you wouldn't know which like I might be like holding the end. So nobody knows which one's the short lot and which one's like the long one. So that's like the phrase like someone got the short end of the stick. Like you like lost out of the like lot draw basically. And so like when I think about like God holding my lot, like it just makes me feel so special. And thinking about God like if God draws it, even if it's like the short stick or it's like whatever stick, like it's me. And God has it. God won. And that's just like a really precious kind of thing. And like it's fine. Like I'm also like the Lord is my chosen portion and my cup. And like thinking about like all the like communion metaphor with that too. But like not only is like the Lord like pre-selected for me, like God is my like pre-portioned freezer dinner for when I'm too busy to cook real food. Like the Lord is my portion. And like when I'm seeking something, like I have portioned out the Lord, like the Lord is my portion. And God like drew me. God drew my stick. Yay. And like I know the Bible and these texts are not just like individual, like they are communal. But I think that's what I love about the Psalms is like they are that personal, like, especially if they're songs of worship where like they're meant to be played like maybe in community with others with some like stringed instruments and different things. Like when you're singing a song, like it is both communal and individual. So it's just really cool. And like the end of it, like you show me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. In your right hand are pleasures forevermore. Like, it's fine. It's gonna be fine. And so this one's just really cute. It's just really cute.
Okay, so before I say this, I promise like I'm good. This is gonna sound bad going back to back with what I just said. Because I'm gonna get personal with it. But this psalm is good and is nice and is what we're supposed to be. But I want to name for myself personally, and maybe for some people at home who are listening along and reading this, I think it's a great way to look at how it's supposed to be, because I think it's a very real conversation to say when it's not. Like, I protect me, O God, for in you I take refuge. That trust, kind of like I just talked about, this is just a continuation of that, like that trust, that like you are the person I fully take refuge, is something that I think a lot of people struggle with. That like I'm going to continuously go back to this, and I'm going to trust in this thing that I can't see, and that's a huge part of faith. And so I think this is the template of what it's supposed to be in the song we are supposed to sing. But I also feel like there are times when it's hard to sing that, and that doesn't mean that we shouldn't, and that's not an excuse. But like I just want to speak to that of like I hear some of these. I bless the Lord who gives me counsel. In the night also my heart instructs me. So you're telling me at night, maybe this is just me. You're telling me at night when you get like the Sunday scaries and it's like I got so much to do on my plate, and that's the moment where the anxiety creeps in. You sit there in your bed and you're like, well, I'm going to trust in God. And then you go to sleep and you don't like fall into that trap of lacking that security, because maybe that's just me. Happens like once a week. I'm in therapy for that. That's a real thing. Or like I keep the Lord always before me. Like always before you. Like you don't ever struggle to put anything before you. So I really do like this psalm, and I'm learning with being a host of this podcast and going through psalms every week. I'm learning to like enjoy psalms for what they are, and like lean into that, because this is a beautiful psalm and this is how it should be. And I think it's a good reminder, especially in moments where it doesn't feel like that, to work towards that.
Sam, I love how you talked about this being an ideal example, and how it should be, how it's supposed to be, but it's not always. Because as you guys are going over this, I was quickly reading over it, and the big thing that stuck out to me was where the psalm started and where it ended. It started with, please help me, God. And there's a lot of questions. There sounds like there's a lot of concern in the psalmist's voice and words. But at the end, it just seems like all that has gone away. And like in so much of my prayers, not all of them, but it happens time where that's the opposite. You start off really good, and then as you kind of go down, it gets worse. And I think about the Psalms, right? It's the biggest book in the Bible, and there's so many examples of things where they start off good and then, or they start off bad and then it goes good, and then it's vice versa. There's so much of that Psalm. So that's what I like about the Psalm is, that's what I like about this annex is sometimes you read the Psalm and it doesn't hit you for that day, or it's the complete opposite of what you happens that day, or sometimes it does hit you that day. And so there's just like an ebb and flow to, I feel like, the Psalms that I'm trying to like understand more and more. And I'm not there yet, but I'm excited about this journey. And then also, Grace, I love how you emphasize the word holding here. I think that is something that's like so important, because just the amount of control over something that you have when you hold it, like a baby or I don't know, something of high value, you have so much control. And it talks a lot about that in their relationship. And it talks about how much control, it kind of just acknowledges the control that God has over them with, talks about mine, talks a lot of things that they have that God has control over. It's like, it's not just mine, it's God's as well. It talks about my body, my cup, my heart, and my lips, my destiny, my home. So I like how you kind of like emphasized the relationship between God and us as him holding us. So I like that. Thank you, Grace.
Thank you. I didn't even think about that. It's really cute. I don't know. And like Sam, like, and Josh, like, I hear y'all about like the Psalms of just like, yeah, God, you got it. Do you? Do you? Because it's rough out here. And like, I think that, and this isn't me trying to negate what you say. I hope that it comes across as like a yes and. It's why I compare the Psalms so much to like songs that we sing nowadays. Like, you know, if you're listening to a song and you're like, dang, like, I'm not actually this mad at this person, but this song really hits the spot. Like, would I say these things to the person? No. But this song really hits the spot. Like, this song says, like, the vibes of this, and, like, every single line, I don't know. But, like, the vibes are immaculate. And here they literally are because it's the Bible. The vibes are immaculate. I'll be here all week. But I think that that's kind of what I appreciate about the Psalms is, like, it can be a repetition of, like, I told you, God, that I believe in you. Come on now. And, like, at first I felt silly comparing it to our, like a freezer meal at the end of the day. But, like, that is how it feels sometimes. Like, it's like, you know, God, like, I trust you. And also, like, it's feeling like a freezer meal. It's not feeling like a buffet. And still kind of, like, figuring out where you stand while also having, like, this set of phrases to go back to. Even if, like, even if I don't believe, like, all of it right now, like, it's nice to just have that to reflect on if/when you want to, I think. And, like, it's why lament and joy psalms are so important, or lament and praise, like, because it all exists. It's just, like, where are you in any given moment? Like, you're not always going to be on the mountaintop. Sometimes you find yourself in the valleys. My apologies to any folks who are listening who do have a Southern preacher voice. Yeah, that's what's in my head is just like that preacher who's like, you're not always gonna be on the mountains, but like it's nice to have while you're on the mountains or falling down the mountain. Either way, you have something. So yeah.
Okay. This, I was gonna segue to transition, but then Josh said something that I like can't physically get out of my head right now. What you talked about with like the holding thing in comparison with the like trusting thing is so real because it also goes into this like if you look at it from a bigger lens, if you look at it from an objective standpoint, and you think about like the questions of like, do I fully take refuge in God, blah, 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 and the idea of like the power and the scale of God. It's the example you used is like holding a baby. Can you imagine if the baby's like, nah, I think I actually got this. I actually don't think I need that. I think I'm good. And like that, as much as that sounds like a joke, that actually is very reassuring sometimes to think about of like, I mean, like what is it gonna do? Like if you're as Grace held up a can of Coke, if you're the can of Coke, you can't just be like, actually, I don't think I need these hands. I actually think I'm doing pretty good on my own. And it like that in itself, that kind of thought can be helping to trust in God. So I don't know. I really like this discussion. I think this is one of our longer Psalm discussions. So I appreciate the conversation we're having. But we are going to go into our break and we'll be back soon. So bye, everybody. We'll be right back.
Hi! No, I'm just kidding. Okay.
My name is Elliot. I'm very unqualified to be talking about leadership. And
No, you took one leadership class, right?
Oh, I did take a leadership test. I got a D though.
Any qualifications? None, actually. I never took a leadership class. But you know what? I like art history. Love to them all.
Love.
Dude, what is that?
Totally.
Hi guys, welcome to the new podcast, What We Want. I'm Vendela,
And I'm Elliot.
and this podcast is really interesting. We've been yapping in private in the weekly little intern meetings, and now we're finally getting our own platform.
Yap show together.
We're going to be talking about different kinds of leaders, whether that's leadership skills, just different historical leaders, which leaders worked for different generations. It's going to get a little interesting, a little spicy, and it's honestly for all generations. Like, we're not just trying to talk to Gen Z. It's going to be everybody is welcome to listen, and hopefully everybody takes away something from this. Because honestly, I'm really excited to see what I want in a leader after talking about this series.
Definitely, it's gonna be a journey because we're finding out what we want in leadership along the way too. So we don't have everything figured out. So we're gonna learn along the way, and that's part of the journey.
So valid, Elliot. Everybody can give their input because we're no professionals. The only thing we're professional at is being Gen Z.
I can't wait.
I'm so excited.
Hooray!
Woo! We slayed that.
We are back because we're going to end today with our blind read. We're going to go into our gospel text of Mark 13, 1 through 8. So Mark 13, 1 through 8. I'm just going to start off immediately. Just going to say it. Don't like it. Don't like it at all. I feel like I've spent the last 2 years on podcasts and on meetings and on everything talking about how good Mark is. And then 2 weeks ago on a recording, I decided I was just going to read the rest of Mark straight through. And this was the part, this one section where I was like, I don't really like this part. And now it's the part that I'm assigned today. So I'm going to talk about it. It's the destruction of the temple foretold. And the rest of Mark, the reason I like Mark, let's start with that. The reason I like Mark is because we get this really real, kind of edgy, the political rebel Jesus who is there to point at the structures and the institutions and flip them on their head and say that they will be taken away and really reverse the power structure of what they knew at the time and how I think what we know now. And that is a Jesus that I really respond to in the text. There's a lot of emotion. There's realness. He gets upset. He has these real human angry moments. And I love that. But the point of that, one of the ways we get to that is through destruction. And so while I will say on every episode when we're talking about destroy the institution, flip the power structure, then Jesus talks about the crazy things that have to happen to get there. And I'm like, wait. Now I'm scared. Which I think is a very normal human thing, because we love to be against and feel strongly about the problems with institutions. But when real, ground foundational shifting change happens, it can be scary. Because we get to this part, chapter 13, where Jesus has been talking about the problems with the temple and the institutions and the religious leaders and all the problems that lead up to here. And the disciples take a moment and they look at the temple, and one of the disciples says, "Look, teacher, what large stones and what large buildings." Because, we don't like the institution, but look how pretty it is. Look how stable that is. And Jesus does not like it and says, all will be thrown down. And so they wait a little bit longer. They walk up to the Mount of Olives opposite the temple. And I can imagine just the shot of them looking across at this temple. And the disciples are like, so what do you mean about that? Of it's gonna be do you mean physically broken? Because that's a lie. And Jesus says, beware that no one leads you astray. Many will come in my name and say, I am he, and they will lead many astray. When you hear of wars and rumors of wars, do not be alarmed. This must take place, but the end is still to come. For nation will rise against nation, and the kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places. There will be famines. This is but the beginning of the birth pangs. Allison told me I'm allowed to curse on this podcast now. I'll just beep it up. Because, like, goddamn, like, that got really intense really quickly. And it throws me every time I read it. And so I really, like, don't have much to say about this because I just want to hear our conversation about it. Because it's the hard part of foundational change is that things have to be destroyed. And as someone who doesn't like war, and someone who doesn't like earthquakes, which I don't think anybody does, how do we stand by this promise that Jesus has that this is everything's going to be okay? And, like, how do we deal with both things? Because we can say that we're for this giant change, but then when Jesus starts talking about how armies are going to be raised up and people are going to start fighting, I don't necessarily like that. So that was a lot. That was kind of a mismatch of things, but I just want to hear y'all's perspective on it because this is the part of Mark that I, like, have to wrestle with every time.
Yeah, Sam, I like in the very beginning when you called Mark edgy, or did you call this chapter edgy? What was it both?
Mark's Jesus is edgy.
Mark's Jesus is edgy. Yeah, I like that, and I was like, my eyes kind of perked up because I'm like, it's kind of, I feel like edgy is kind of like a newer word maybe, and I've never heard anyone describe Jesus or much less like the Bible as edgy. So I was kind of interested, like, where are you going with this? And then you got to that dark part where Jesus talks about the end of the world and all these things. It felt like Revelation. It felt like I was like kind of reading through Revelation, and it was edgy, and it felt like for all the Gospels, I feel like Mark has this ability to kind of make us uncomfortable sometimes and, like, kind of question the Jesus that we thought we knew. Shout out to Derek. Derek's doing that right now in our gathering groups, our community groups. And so, yeah, and I also like, Sam, how you look at this through a political lens because you're in Washington, D.C., and that's what your major is all about. So I appreciate that, because when I, like, read this, like, oh, yeah, I see the politics, but I'm just going to ignore it. And you just, like, come at it head on. So I really appreciate that, because it is an election year, but there is also some politics here that I think is, like, worth talking about with the amount of change. And I feel like as humans, it's hard for us to accept the fact that nothing lasts forever, that the only thing that's not going to change. Oh, wait, what? Yeah, I've messed up that quote, I think. But yeah, the fact that, like, everything is going to change at some point is, I think, such a hard thing for us to accept, especially if I've gotten older. I feel like that's definitely an old man, like, idea, is like, oh man, these darn kids these days. And so, like, they got, like, scared of change or whatever, and what it means. There's definitely, like, a fear there. And for Jesus to, like, kind of call that out when the disciples ask a question is very, very edgy, I must say. So
I love edgy as the term for it. Like, I was, as you were talking about it, re-scanning over this page, and we have him kind of threatening the religious leaders and saying he's going to come back and become the new temple, and also him asking, is it lawful to pay taxes, which is one of my favorite parts of Mark, because it's so not important, but Jesus is like, but should we pay taxes? He's an edgy, he's a rival of all the institutions.
Does Jesus have that alpha riz? Did I do it? Did I do it, kids? You're not kids, but did I do it?
And with that, we're going to end today's episode.
Will you pray with me? No, I mean, you're right. And it's like, when you were talking about it, Sam, like, I was just because I'm at an institution that's part of a larger institution. Like that, I was just sitting the entire time you were talking about this, and I was like, damn, you're right. Because it's so difficult sometimes to make change happen, like, because it happens in such small increments. And so I think that's part of it too, is like this, like, incremental progress that we're used to, or that we're, like, just begging for at this point. And Jesus is talking about it all happening so fast. And like this like crashing and this like destruction to create this new thing. And then here I am, just hoping one day to get like the right audiobook accommodations, you know, and like whatever that looks like for each of us as individuals. And it's like, yeah, tear down the institution, but like gently, because I'm still here. I'm still part of the institution. And so it's really tough. It's a really tough balance. And I think like the quickness with which Jesus talks about it is really, really, you're right. Like it's jarring. Because like it's a beautiful campus. And last year, we wrote really beautiful papers called institutional analysis papers. And like openly criticizing things that are wrong with certain institutions. And they were beautiful papers. That's all I have. Everything sucks.
And I think it kind of like this, we always find like a common theme in these just because of how these episodes are structured, but also how the liturgical text is structured. I think one of the things we're hinting at right now is that declarative confidentness that we were talking about in the beginning. That is what Jesus speaks with. That is how Jesus sees the world. And that can be terrifying to people, to like normal everyday people, because as much as we can say that we know where Jesus is coming from and agree with him, if you were standing there, one of the commentaries I read put it perfectly of like, if you're walking down the street and someone's shouting about the apocalypse on the other side, do you go talk to them? Do you see them as a religious leader? Or do we ignore it? And so like when you're standing there with your teacher who has been right about everything else, but he says that everything is going to be destroyed, sometimes you just want to look at a pretty temple and just want to admire it. And it's really crazy to imagine how quickly that can go away. So yeah, we're going to transition with that. That was kind of a solemn one to end on. But now we're going to go into our blind read of Samuel. So we're doing 1 Samuel chapter 1, verses 4 through 20. And we're going to do, usually our blind reads, I kind of like do a little introduction of it and then ask some questions and we start from there. But we're going to do a complete conversation about this one, which is partially just because we're trying out a new format and we've talked about this before and wanting to do this, but also partially because I don't have that much to say, but I like to talk. So I think a conversation with this text is going to be interesting because I read this and first of all, I'm like, wow, that's my name. That's really cool. This is part of what I'm named after. But the other thing is it feels very stereotypical story of a woman in the Bible. And like there are a lot of archetypes of characters in the Bible, but this one of like a devout woman who is barren, who believes in God and is given that, like, that's not a bad story. It's just like, I feel like it's one I've heard before. So reading it, nothing immediately jumped out at me, but I know that like you guys are going to have more to say on this and I want to hear a conversation about it. Oh, Grace is already excited.
Yeah. So side note for the viewers and or listeners, when we were discussing this text beforehand, or when we were discussing our discussion around the text, I was like, oh, I know what we're going to talk about. And Sam was like, what? And I was like, well, I'm not going to tell you yet. So nobody knows what I'm about to say. But now you do. What I love about this text, it's, you know, this man is going up and he's like so devoted to family and to all of these things. And he's dropping these sacrifices and he would give portions to his wife and to all of her sons and daughters, which is already significant, I would say, because like the fact that it was mentioned, maybe not his direct action, like I think that is also significant, but the mention in the biblical text of like the daughters got mentioned, wild. And then we continue. He's giving a double portion to Hannah because he loves her even though the Lord had closed her womb. And like, we know nowadays a woman's worth is not in what the uterus does. We know uteruses don't equate to women always. Like, we know these things, but in this time, it was absolutely, like, politically and socially that, like, you have children. You have to have children. That's how you carry on your lineage. That's like that's everything. And so it's why it's such a big deal when people can't have kids then. And it's still a huge deal if people want kids now and can't have them. And that's like a familial thing, and that's a connectional thing, and that's something that like oftentimes folks will like deal with together. But like, one, even before Hannah has a child of any gender, right? They don't know if it's going to be a boy and if he's going to carry on the lineage. They don't know that. This is before she even like, this is while she's mad at God. Because this ritual is pissing her off so much because she's like, God, like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, this is all I want. I can't have kids. This is all that, like, society might say that I'm worth. And I know that this man loves me so much. And why? If I can't even have kids. And yet he's giving her a double portion compared to, like, so many people with, like giving these portions to his wife, Penina, or Penina. I don't know how we're supposed to say her name. It's important to learn. I'm going to say Penina for now, like giving a portion to Penina and to her sons and to her daughters, and still caring for Hannah as Hannah so much that she earns a double portion. And it's not even that she earns a double portion, but he feels so generous that he wants to. And so then when Elkanah is talking to her later about, like, why are you crying? Why aren't you eating? Like, why are you so sad? Like, am I not more to you than these kids? And she's like, this is just so disturbing to her. This whole situation is so disturbing because it's like, is it seen as a failure on her body? Is it seen as some sort of curse? Is it seen like there are so many layers to why someone might feel like crap for not being able to have kids in this context? And so one, it's super significant that she has a child, and it's a son, and we know that it's Samuel, King Samuel of all people. But like, it's just, well, and even later, like, they're talking about if she's like, are you drunk? Like, that's how much she cares for God and how much she's like trying to put her faith in God after all of this. Like, I don't know. It's just really incredible.
I know, I see like what you're pointing out, and I live in this story. The part that is more interesting to me is before we get Samuel, in that questioning that you're talking about, in that waiting, in the devotion without promise of something at the end, without promise of a miracle. And that's just, maybe this is part of why I don't connect with this specific part of Samuel, is like, I immediately go to all the people who I know who are also so devoted and don't get that. And that's why I like that beginning more. Like, it's easy to like, well, it's not. Hannah is in, you were correct. Hannah's in like the lowest status of society because of the awful part, like, place she was put in and the time she lived in. Like, that is true. And that is not something to diminish. But I don't know. My brain, every time I see a story that this quickly goes from devotion to miracle, I'm like, well, it's done. And I part of me wishes that we get more Hannah and more of that, those feelings and that sitting with it, so that the birth feels even more important. And that's why I do really appreciate right after this when Hannah has Samuel and gets to celebrate that and gets to show him before the Lord and has that moment, because maybe it's just the like way I read it and the way my Bible is structured, but it really feels like we can dive into this further, but it's like a paragraph of it and then boom, the miracle immediately happens. And I feel like in today's day and age, I feel like there's so many times where we feel like we're still in those first couple paragraphs waiting for that miracle, and that's the part that I think is the biggest test. I don't know if any of that made sense.
No, it does. And like, I think that you pinpointed something that also pisses me off about this text, because we have 1st and 2nd Samuel. I need a Hannah, like I need a Hannah. And like, even in here, like when we're looking verse 7, like, 6 into 7, like her rival is provoking her, and like, this is like, it was such a burden on her. And then verse 7, so it went on year by year. Like Hannah is going, like this is taking place over years. And you're right, we get this little, like we get like 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs, maybe 4. Like that's not enough. That's not enough to tell this woman's story. And like, I think that that's why I agree with you. And I think it's why it's so important that we're looking at the fact that Elkanah is giving Hannah like his devotion just as she, like, because of who she is, and not like Elkanah has no clue that she's going to have a kid later. It's just like, I love you. This is for you, as you, not like in spite of the fact that you can't have a kid, like just like he loves her. And she's
Josh,
miserable and he still loves her.
Josh, I know we went really fast back and forth for a second, me and Grace, but I wanna leave space for you to also join.
No, I enjoyed it. I think you guys both kind of brought your own take on it. I just enjoyed watching the back and forth and the like comparison and contrast that you guys had. I will say, Grace, I liked like the emotion that you brought and like the authenticity as a woman to read this and the different perspective that you got, because this is like, I feel like this is one of the most emotional texts that I've ever read in the Bible. I know it's a very like subjective, opinionated thing, but for me personally, I think you can't like to separate the emotion out of this and try and like think about it in some other weird way that is not how this should be done. Just briefly looking at it, like there's so many exclamation marks in here of shouting, and there's so much emotion. There's such a real struggle that's going on. There's accusations of stuff that's going on. There's like a disbelief. There's a struggle in the disbelief, but you want to believe. I think it's very real, and there's some emotion that we know a little bit of, but again, Sam, you talked about this. I feel like there's a huge part of this missing. Like I was reading over it, and the amount of words to the amount of time that this covers, does that make sense? Of how much time goes from verse 8 to verse 20, when all of a sudden, they're in the struggle. All of a sudden, she's conceived and gives birth. Like there's no like pregnancy 9-month. What was that like? Was it celebration? What was that pregnancy like? How long did it take to them to know? Like, were they, definitely feel like there's some stuff here missing. Makes me wonder why. Or just I feel like there's some stuff that's left up to interpretation that I feel like Sam kind of hinted at this, or I kind of struggle with, like when things are like cut and dry. But there's some things that I think you have to sit with and wrestle with. But it moves so fast, and you don't really have time to sit in it. Like I feel like you just need to sit in this story verse by verse to really get the full effect.
Part of me, Josh, to your point, like I was just reading a commentary about one of the other texts that talked about like how infrequently the Bible uses like strong adjectives to talk about what's like adverbs of like wept bitterly and like really feel this. And so, yeah, I like do want to live in this moment. And part of me wonders, like, is it best for, if you're going to like break this down as a lectionary text and you're going to use this, is this one that you want to do in one sermon? Or is this one that you want to split up and just have a congregation or have a group of people or have a storyline, a narrative that stays in wept bitterly and misery and that faithful devotion through it? Like, this almost feels like what a lot of people talk about with Advent, where like you're getting to this point, or Easter is a better example of like the hardship you have to go through, the waiting that you have to go through to get to this point. Because this one, it's like, this is really, really bad, and I'm going to talk about it, and then and there's a baby. Like, I think of like the cartoons where like the baby like pops into the hands instead of having that like visceral, real, humanistic approach that has to happen, and that long period that you have to wait with that. Yeah, that I really like doing these kind of conversations. I think we should find more space for it, because I think it's good to see how each of us can not just bring something to a text, but like deconstruct it instead of bringing one interpretation that is then commented on, taking apart, wrestling with it, living with it. Because that's kind of like the point of this show, in some ways. So I want to end today just with that understanding and how the Bible really should be looked at, like how it should be wrestled with and interpreted and chewed through. And like, it is a process to go through. It's not just something that comes easily. So with that, Josh, do you want to close us in prayer today?
Yes, I can do that. I would love to do that. Dear God, thank you for bringing us all here today. Thank you for the Annex podcast and Grace and Sam, and thank you for their unique and different perspectives. Thank you for allowing us the time to just slow down and dissect these verses one by one and really figure out what they mean to us and what they mean for us. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen. I want to thank you two for joining us, and then also everybody at home. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you got a chance to really sit with some of these texts, whether we like them or not, whether we immediately agree with them or not. Getting able to sit and feel that and have that space is really important. So thank you guys for coming with me. And with that, we're all going to say bye.